Simone Ashworth was 34 years old when she overheard her husband's voice through a cracked restaurant door, laughing to a colleague at their own anniversary dinner. Terrence didn't know she was listening. He said he was trading up. He said she was getting too old to keep up with where he was headed. Simone walked back to the table and finished her wine like she'd heard nothing. For 10 years, she had designed every property in his real estate empire. Every lobby, every finish, every square foot that made his company look like a vision. Her name was on none of it. The next morning, while Terrence was at golf, Simone found the second phone hidden in his bag. The messages, the hotel receipts, the girlfriend who called her, washed up and knew exactly who she was married to. Terrence had no idea what she'd just found, and he had even less idea what she was about to do with it. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today. And if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The dress was ivory silk with a deep-cut back, and Simone had sketched it on a napkin the same way she sketched everything. Fast, certain, like the idea had been waiting inside her all along and just needed a way out. She had made it herself. Nobody knew that. Nobody asked. That was the thing about Simone Baptiste, Simone Ashworth now. For 10 years, she could build something beautiful, and the room would look right past her to admire whoever was standing nearest to it. Tonight, that person was Terrence. He sat across from her at table 4, inside Aurelius, the most talked-about restaurant in the city, wearing a charcoal suit that she had picked out. His jaw was clean-shaved. His watch caught the candlelight. He looked exactly like the kind of man who belonged in a place like this. All warm brick walls, low amber lighting, and white tablecloths so stiff they crinkled when you touched them. "You look stunning," he said, and he meant it the way men mean things when they're also thinking about something else. "Thank you," she said. She did look stunning. She knew that. The ivory dress sat perfectly against her deep brown skin, the silk draping along her collarbone like it had been poured there. Her hair was pinned low at the nape of her neck. Simple gold earrings. No excess. Simone had never needed excess to make a statement. The waiter refilled their glasses. Terrence launched into a story about the Harlow Street project, a mixed-use development on the east side of the city that was already generating buzz in every real estate column that mattered. He talked about the rooftop terrace, the glass and steel atrium, the way the natural light would pour through the residential lobby at exactly the right angle in the mornings. Simone had designed all of it. Every property in the Ashworth Premier portfolio, 12 buildings over 10 years, had been designed by her. She worked from their home office while Terrence took meetings. She produced the floor plans, the mood boards, the material selections, the light studies. She drafted the spatial concepts that made journalists call Terrence a visionary and a developer with a rare eye for the emotional geometry of a space. Emotional geometry. That was a phrase she had used in her own notes once. She'd seen it in a profile piece about Terrence last spring, printed in bold. She had not been mentioned in the article. She had cut it out anyway, folded it neatly, and slid it into the folder where she kept everything else. The Harlow piece in urban form was great, she said, keeping her voice easy. The photo spread came out beautifully. Right? Terrence leaned back, pleased. Martinez really gets what we're doing. I'm thinking about giving him exclusive access for the Meridian launch, too. We. He used that word sometimes, loosely, like loose change he tossed without counting. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted. Not much, just a flicker. The way it did when it was a call he wanted to take, but didn't want her to notice him wanting to. "1 second," he said. "Business?" He pushed back his chair and walked toward the back hallway near the coat check, his hand already bringing the phone to his ear. The hallway had a door that swung half shut behind him, but didn't catch. Simone sat with her wine glass. She could hear him laughing. She wasn't trying to listen. She genuinely wasn't. But Aurelius was quiet in the particular way expensive restaurants were quiet. Soft jazz, low ceilings, and sound that traveled. His voice drifted through the gap. Yeah, I know. 10 years. But look, Marcus, I'm trading up. She's a great woman, but she's getting too old to keep up with where I'm headed. I need someone who matches the energy of where the brand is going. More laughter. Low and comfortable, the sound of a man completely at ease. Yeah, it's already in motion. Just keeping things smooth until the time is right. The door swung a little more closed. His voice dropped to a murmur she couldn't make out anymore. Simone set her wineglass down on the tablecloth. Her fingers left it. She looked at her hand. It was trembling, just barely, just at the tips. And that small, quiet shake felt like the most honest thing in the room. She folded both hands in her lap. By the time Terrence walked back to the table, tucking his phone into his jacket pocket, she had already arranged her face. Soft eyes, easy smile, the same composed, unreadable expression she had worn for 10 years in every room where her name wasn't mentioned. Sorry about that, he said, dropping back into his chair. Where were we? Dessert menu, she said pleasantly. He picked up the menu and smiled at her over the top of it, warm and relaxed, no guilt anywhere on his face. She smiled back, and her hand, resting in her lap, out of his sight, continued to tremble. Terrence left at 7:15. She heard the shower cut off, the closet door, the dresser drawer. The ordinary morning sounds of a man who had slept clean and easy. He came downstairs in his golf clothes, light khakis, a white polo, a cap he adjusted twice in the hallway mirror, and poured himself a coffee without offering her one. Back by 4, he said. Okay, she said. The front door closed. His car pulled out of the driveway. The sound of the engine faded down the street, and then it was just quiet. Simone sat at the kitchen table for a full 5 minutes without moving. Then she stood up. She didn't go straight to the office. She went to the garage first, because that's where she'd seen him drop his bag the night before. A heavy black Callaway bag he'd propped against the wall near the recycling bins. It was still there. She stood in the doorway of the garage for a moment. The air smelled like motor oil and old cardboard. Morning light pushed through the single, high window and fell across the concrete floor in a pale strip. The golf bag was zipped, all 4 pockets. She crossed the garage, crouched down, and opened the first pocket. Tees, a glove, a folded scorecard from a course she didn't recognize. She opened the second, a sleeve of balls, a tube of sunscreen, a chapstick. Third pocket, a phone. Black, slim, not his model, no case. She picked it up. It was unlocked. No passcode, or the last session hadn't timed out yet. She wasn't sure which. She didn't stop to think about it. The Messages app was open. The contact name at the top of the screen was B. She read standing up, right there in the garage, the concrete cold through the soles of her slippers. Brianna Voss. She knew the name. She had heard Terrence mention her in passing. The new marketing coordinator at the firm. Sharp girl. Great instincts for social media. Simone had even seen a photo once, at a firm holiday event she hadn't attended, but had seen pictures of online. 26 years old, wide smile, the kind of energy that photographs well. The messages went back 9 months. She read them slowly, carefully. The way she read floor plans, looking for the thing that didn't line up. You need to stop playing house, Brianna had written in March. She's washed up, Ter. She's past her prime. You know it. I know it. The only person pretending not to know it is you. Terrence had replied with a laughing emoji. She scrolled further. There were hotel names. The Meridian on 5th, the Langham downtown. She recognized the Meridian. She had designed the lobby renovation for a client Terrence had pitched last year. She remembered sketching the lighting plan on a Sunday afternoon while Terrence was supposedly at a client dinner. She went back to the golf bag, the side pocket, the long flat one she'd skipped. Hotel receipts. 6 of them, paper-clipped together, all made out to a T. Morris. Dates stretching from February to last month. Each one from a different property. All midweek, all single night, all paid in cash. T. Morris. She photographed every receipt. She laid them out on the clean concrete floor, one at a time, and photographed each individually, then all together. Then she picked up the phone again and went through the messages from the beginning, photographing each screen. She moved steadily. No shaking now. Her hands were completely still. Her mind was doing the thing it did when she was deep in a design problem. Quiet and sharp and very, very focused. She found the message she'd been looking for near the end of a thread from 2 weeks ago. "Does she even know you're planning to leave?" Brianna had asked. "Not yet," Terrence had written back, keeping things smooth until after the Meridian pitch. "Then I'm done." "Good," Brianna had replied. "You've been carrying dead weight long enough." Simone looked at those 2 words for a moment. Dead weight. She set the phone down on the floor. She placed the receipts back in the flat pocket, paper clip still on, exactly as she'd found them. She zipped all 4 pockets closed. She picked the bag up and leaned it back against the wall at the same angle. Same position, the shoulder strap looped the same way over the handle. She looked at it. It looked exactly as it had when she walked in. She turned off the garage light and went inside. At the kitchen table, she poured herself the coffee Terrence hadn't offered her, and she sat down with her phone in both hands. She opened her contacts, scrolled to the B's. Yvonne answered on the second ring. "Hey," Simone said. "Are you free this week?" A short pause. Yvonne knew her sister's voice the way a musician knows when a note is off. "For you?" Yvonne said. "I'm free right now. What happened?" Simone looked out the kitchen window at the backyard. The garden she had planted herself, the stone path she had laid herself, the life she had built with her own 2 hands. "I need your help with something," she said. "I'll explain when I see you." The attorney's name was Patricia Holt. Her office was on the 14th floor of a glass building downtown, with a view of the city that Simone barely noticed. She sat across from Patricia at a clean oak desk and placed her phone flat on the surface between them. "Everything is on here," Simone said. "Messages, receipts, dates. I photographed them in order." Patricia scrolled through the images without expression, the kind of face you develop after 20 years of hearing the worst things people do to each other. She paused once, near the middle, read something, kept scrolling. "This is solid," Patricia said. "The affair is documented. That helps." She set the phone down. "But I want to be honest with you. The infidelity gets you leverage in the divorce, but it doesn't automatically give you credit for the work. You said you've been designing his properties for 10 years? "Every single one," Simone said. "Uncredited?" "Uncredited, no contracts in my name, no invoices. The awards the firm has won. The Regional Design Excellence Award in 2019, the Metro Build Honors last spring. All submitted under Ashworth Premier Developments, under Terrence." Patricia tapped her pen twice against her notepad. "That's the harder fight. Without financial records showing you were compensated or contracts listing you as designer of record, the courts may treat your contributions as a spousal role rather than a professional one. It's not fair, but it's how the paperwork reads." Simone had expected this. She nodded once. "I have a sister," Simone said. "She's a forensic accountant. She's already agreed to help." "Good." Patricia leaned forward slightly. "If there's any paper trail, payments to vendors you authorized, emails where your name appears as a decision maker, anything showing you directed those projects, she needs to find it. All of it. She will, Simone said. She said it the way she said everything. Quietly, without drama, like it was already done. The following weeks were ordinary. That was the strange part. Simone cooked dinner. She attended a neighborhood association meeting. She finished the preliminary sketches for a small residential project she'd been sitting on, a client contact she'd cultivated quietly on her own. She smiled at Terrence over the breakfast table. She asked about his day. She gave him nothing to read. Terrence, growing more comfortable by the day, started coming home later. He stopped explaining where he'd been. He left his second phone charging in the car instead of the garage, a small adjustment that told her he was getting careless. He had already moved on in his mind. She could see it in the way he looked at her now, or rather the way he didn't, like she was furniture he'd already decided to sell. On a Tuesday evening in October, he sat down across from her at the kitchen table and told her, "I think we both know this hasn't been working for a long time," he said. He had the tone of a man who'd rehearsed the speech in the car. "I care about you. I do. But I think it's better for both of us if we go our separate ways." He slid an envelope across the table. "I want this to be easy," he said. "No ugliness. You'll be taken care of." Simone picked up the envelope. She opened it. She looked at the check inside. The number on it represented a decade of her life, a decade of her talent, quietly discarded in the form of 5 neat digits. She looked at it for exactly as long as she needed to. Then she set it down, smoothed it flat with 2 fingers, and looked at Terrence. "Okay," she said. He blinked. He had clearly been prepared for tears or rage or both. He'd worn the expression of a man bracing for a storm. Now his face shifted, confused, and beneath the confusion, something that looked almost like disappointment, like he'd wanted the scene. "That's okay?" he said. "Yes," she said simply. "I'll have my attorney reach out to yours this week." He opened his mouth, closed it, nodded slowly, the way people do when they're not sure they've won. He moved out within the month. Constance Ashworth was there the day the movers came. She'd offered to help, which mostly meant standing in the front hallway, watching her son direct strangers through a house that no longer felt like anyone's. She was 63 years old, and she stood with her hands clasped in front of her, back straight, saying very little. When Terrence went outside to sign the moving truck paperwork, Constance turned and looked at Simone, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs. The older woman's eyes were steady. Something moved in them. Not pity. Not quite. She opened her mouth. Then she closed it again, pressed her lips together, gave Simone a single, slow nod, deliberate and private, and turned back toward the door. That was 1 year ago. Now the doors of the Aldridge Hotel parted wide, and warm gold light spilled out onto the marble steps, and Simone Ashworth walked in. She wore a gown the color of deep water. Her shoulders were bare. Her chin was level. Beside her was Julian Cross, tall, measured, his hand resting lightly at the small of her back. 20 feet away, at a table near the far edge of the room, Terrence Ashworth looked up. His face went the color of old ash. The room was exactly what Simone had designed it to be. The Aldridge's grand hall rose 2 stories high, its ceiling crossed by slender wooden beams the color of warm honey. The lighting was low and intentional, soft pools of amber that made every face look its best. The walls curved gently inward at the far end, a subtle architectural choice that made the enormous space feel intimate. Fresh white flowers stood tall in black stone vases. The floors were dark marble, veined with gold. Simone had spent 4 months on this room. She knew every corner of it, the way she knew her own handwriting. She was standing near the entry hall with Julian when she saw Terrence coming toward them. He was wearing a charcoal suit she recognized. Italian cut, slightly too tight across the shoulders now. His smile was already in place. That practiced, warm, forward-leaning smile he used at events like this one. The one he'd spent years building. But his eyes were working hard, scanning her, then Julian, then back. Simone. He said her name like it was a question. He extended his hand to Julian without missing a beat. Terrence Ashworth, Ashworth Premier Developments. Julian took his hand once. Firm, brief. Julian Cross. Of course, Terrence said. The smile held. Incredible space tonight. Incredible. Julian, I've actually been hoping to connect with your team. We have some projects in development that I think would be a natural... Terrence. Simone said his name quietly. Just that. He stopped. She tilted her head a fraction. I designed this hotel. Silence moved between them, quick and sharp, like something snapping in two. Terrence's smile stayed on his face, but only technically. The warmth behind it was gone. I'm sorry? He said. The Aldridge, Simone said. Her voice was even, conversational almost. All of it, the hall, the guest wing layouts, the exterior facade treatment, the material palette throughout. I was hired as lead designer 14 months ago. The contract finalized last spring. Terrence looked at Julian. Julian looked back at him with the patient, unbothered expression of a man who had long ago stopped being impressed by salesmanship. Simone Baptiste Design has been our partner on this project from the ground up, Julian said. She was the first call I made when we broke ground on this property. He paused. I should mention, I wasn't aware until recently that she and I had a mutual connection through you. Small world. Terrence let out a short laugh. It came out slightly too high. Well, he said. Well, I had no idea Simone had gone out on her own. That's great. That's really... It went well, Simone said. He looked at her. And for just a moment, underneath the smile and the suit and the rehearsed confidence, she could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, running back through the timeline, trying to figure out how far behind he already was. Julian, he said, pivoting, I'd love to find 10 minutes tonight to talk about what we have in the pipeline. Ashworth Premier has 3 properties in development right now that I think would be exactly the kind of... I appreciate that, Julian said. His tone was polite. It was also final. Tonight, I'm here to celebrate this project and the team that built it. If your team wants to reach out to my office about future opportunities, they're welcome to do that. He looked at Terrence once more, just once, and then turned slightly toward Simone with a quiet ease that made it clear the conversation was over. Terrence had no choice but to take the step back. He took it from across the room near a high-top table by the bar. Brianna Voss watched. She held her champagne glass with both hands without realizing it. Her eyes moved between Terrence and Simone and Julian, reading the body language the way she'd been trained to read a room. And what she read made her stomach pull tight. Terrence was leaning too far forward. Julian wasn't leaning at all. Simone was completely still. She knew what that meant. She reached for her phone and opened the firm's calendar. The Aldridge pitch was supposed to be their anchor. The one Terrence had told her would change everything for the firm. New funding, new contracts, the kind of visibility that could stabilize everything that had quietly started to crack over the past 6 months. She had drafted the materials herself, built the deck, written the outreach, and Simone Baptiste, Simone Ashworth, was already inside the walls. Brianna set her glass down. She straightened her dress. She kept her face smooth and professional because there were people in this room who knew her face, and she wasn't going to give them anything to remember. But her pulse was quick. When Terrence finally pulled away from the conversation and moved toward the edge of the room, she intercepted him at the corner near the coat check, out of earshot. Hey, she touched his arm. We need to talk privately, before the night's over. Her voice was low. There's something going on with the firm's accounts that can't wait until Monday. Terrence looked at her. The smile was gone now. All of it was gone. "Not here," he said. Yvonne's office smelled like coffee and cold air. It was a small space on the 14th floor of a building downtown, clean, organized, every surface deliberately bare except for what was currently being worked on. Simone had always liked that about it. Nothing wasted, nothing extra. She arrived at 8 in the morning with 2 cups of coffee from the place on the corner and found Yvonne already at her desk, a legal pad filled front to back next to her keyboard, 3 accordion folders stacked in a neat row beside it. Yvonne looked up when Simone came in. She didn't smile exactly. It was something steadier than a smile. "Close the door," she said. Simone did. She set one of the cups on the desk, kept the other in her hand, and sat down across from her sister. The morning light came through the blinds in pale, even stripes. Yvonne opened the first folder. "I'm going to go in order," she said, "because the order matters." The infidelity didn't start with Brianna. That was the first thing Yvonne laid out, sliding a printed spreadsheet across the desk, columns of dates, transaction amounts, vendor names that didn't match any real vendor when you searched them. "Consulting fees," Yvonne said. Her voice was flat and precise. "That's what the line items say. Consulting fees, starting 4 years and 3 months ago." She tapped the top row. "This first one is a hotel reservation in Charleston. 2 nights. He billed it to the business as a site consultation for a property that wasn't acquired until 7 months later." Simone looked at the dates. She remembered that weekend. Terrence had said it was a scouting trip. She had stayed home and finished the schematic drawings for the Pemberton project. She had worked the entire weekend without stopping. "How many?" she asked. "Women?" Yvonne asked. 3 that I can confirm through the financial trail. Brianna is the most recent and the longest running." She opened the second folder, but Brianna is also different from the others. Simone looked up. Yvonne pulled out a stapled packet and placed it on the desk between them. It was a printout. Email headers, dates, subject lines. Some lines were highlighted in yellow. The others were just covered up with money, Yvonne said. Brianna was covered up with access. She walked Simone through it calmly, the way she walked through every hard thing, with the same steady voice she'd used when they were children, and something needed to be said clearly. Brianna Voss had joined Ashworth Premier Developments as a marketing coordinator 26 months ago. She had been promoted to marketing director 14 months later, 6 weeks after the affair began. There was no public posting for the director role, no interview process on record. The salary jump was 40%. "He created the position," Yvonne said. "It didn't exist before her." Simone set down her coffee cup. She looked at the papers in front of her and said nothing for a moment. Then Yvonne opened the third folder. "This is the part I want you to look at carefully." Inside were photocopies, award submission forms, the kind issued by the Regional Design Excellence Board. Simone recognized the format immediately. She had seen her own work described in them before, always credited to Ashworth Premier Developments, always under Terrence's name. She had told herself for years that it was just how the business worked, that it didn't matter who got the credit as long as the work was good. She had told herself a lot of things. "These are the submission materials for the last 3 award cycles," Yvonne said. "I pulled them through a records request. The board keeps archives." She pointed to the header on the top page, a submission for the Harmon Street mixed-use project. Simone had designed every interior and structural layout on that project in a 14-week stretch. She could still feel the deadline in her shoulders. The submission listed Terrence Ashworth as sole creative director and design lead. "Now look at the metadata," Yvonne said. She flipped to the last page of the packet. A technical printout. Document creation data, edit logs, the kind of information most people never thought to request. The submission had been drafted in Brianna Voss's work account. Her initials were in the author field. She had built the document, formatted it, written the project description in Terrence's voice. And she had left Simone's name out. Not by accident, not by oversight. Simone sat very still. She thought about the Harmon Street building. She thought about the 3 months she had spent on the material sourcing alone. She thought about the award plaque Terrence had mounted in his office, angled so it caught the light from the window. She knew, Simone said. It wasn't a question. She knew exactly whose work it was, Yvonne said. She helped draft every submission in that folder. Simone reached across the desk and picked up the packet. She turned each page slowly. Steady hands, the same steady hands she'd had in that garage 14 months ago. I need copies of all of these, she said. The submissions, the metadata, the award records. Already printed, Yvonne said. And I need you to put together a formal report. Simone set the packet down. Everything documented, formatted for a submission to the ethics board that issued these awards. Constance Ashworth chose a restaurant that suited her. Quiet, unhurried, the kind of place where the tablecloths were white linen and the lunch crowd spoke in low voices. A place where serious things could be said without an audience. She was already seated when Simone arrived. Pearls at her throat, a dark blazer, her silver hair pinned back the way it always was, neat and deliberate. She stood when she saw Simone come through the door. "Thank you for coming," she said. Not warm exactly, but sincere in the way Constance always was. Measured, without pretense. "Of course," Simone said. They sat. A waiter came. They ordered without looking at the menus very long. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room filled the silence for them. The quiet clatter of silverware, the low hum of other conversations. Constance folded her hands on the table and looked at Simone the way she sometimes had over the years, carefully, like she was deciding how much to say and in what order. "I owe you an apology," Constance said. "Constance, for my silence." "You don't." "I do." Constance shook her head once, firmly. "I watched what happened in that house for a long time. I told myself it wasn't my place." She paused. "It was my place. It just wasn't convenient." Simone looked at her. She didn't argue. She had learned a long time ago that Constance Ashworth said what she meant and didn't need to be redirected once she had decided to speak. "Why now?" Simone asked. Constance reached down beside her chair and lifted a slim leather portfolio onto the table. She set it between them but didn't open it yet. "Because what he's doing now is different," she said. "It's not just foolishness. It's not just weakness." Her voice stayed even, but something behind her eyes went hard and flat. "He's trying to rewrite the record." Simone had heard her attorney use that phrase 2 weeks ago in a different context. She kept her face still. Constance opened the portfolio. Inside were documents, printed emails, legal correspondence, internal memos on Ashworth Premier letterhead. She didn't hand them to Simone immediately. She spread the first page out flat on the table between them, smoothing it with one careful hand. "He hired a second law firm 4 months ago," Constance said. "One I wasn't supposed to know about. He used a billing address I recognized, an old holding company his father set up years ago." She tapped the top of the page. "I have copies of everything they've been preparing." Simone leaned forward slightly and read. The document was a legal memo. It outlined a plan to amend project agreements going back 9 years. The language was careful and precise, the way legal language always was when it was trying to obscure something. But the meaning was clear enough. Terrence was removing Simone's name from the contracts, from the project agreements. from every signed document that had ever connected her to the work she had spent a decade building. "He's planning to sell the firm," Constance said, "before the end of the year, and the valuation depends on what the portfolio looks like, who gets credit for what." She turned to the next page without waiting. If her name isn't on anything, the assets look cleaner, more valuable, all credited to him. Simone didn't say anything for a moment. She looked at the pages in front of her. She thought about 9 years of work, the Pemberton Project, Harmon Street, the 7 residential builds in the Westlake corridor that had been photographed for 3 different architecture magazines, all under his name. She thought about the nights she had stayed up until 2 in the morning, refining load-bearing layouts while Terrence slept, and then watched him walk into client meetings the next day and describe those layouts as if he had imagined them himself. She thought about how long she had let that happen. "How far along is it?" she asked. "The amended contracts haven't been filed yet," Constance said, "but they're drafted. His attorney was pushing to file within the next 3 weeks. Simone looked up. 3 weeks. "I want you to have these," Constance said. She closed the portfolio and pushed it across the table. All of it. The memo, the draft amendments, the correspondence, everything. She held Simone's gaze. His father built something real. Terrence inherited every advantage a person could be given, and he used it to take from someone who was standing right next to him. She straightened slightly. "That is not the Ashworth name I was asked to carry." Simone picked up the portfolio. It was heavier than it looked. "Thank you, Constance," she said. Constance gave a single, small nod. Then she picked up her fork and returned her attention to her plate, as if the hard thing had been said, and there was nothing left to add. Simone walked out of the restaurant 20 minutes later into bright afternoon air. She stopped on the sidewalk, portfolio tucked under her arm, and pulled out her phone. Her attorney answered on the second ring. "I have new documents," Simone said. "I need you to file for retroactive authorship credit across every affected contract. All of them." She glanced down at the portfolio in her arm. "I have everything you need to do it." The offices of Cross Hospitality sat on the 42nd floor of a glass tower downtown, and from the outside, they looked exactly like what they were. The kind of place where decisions worth millions were made before lunch. Terrence Ashworth had been in rooms like this before, or he told himself that. He straightened his tie in the elevator's reflective doors on the way up. Brianna stood beside him in a fitted blazer, a leather presentation binder tucked under one arm, her hair pulled back sharp and professional. Douglas Reyes stood on Terrence's other side, thick-necked, quiet, sweating slightly through his collar despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. Douglas had been Terrence's business partner for 6 years. He had personally guaranteed 3 loans against the firm's outstanding debts. This meeting was not optional for him. It had not been optional for a while. "We're ready," Brianna said. Her voice was steady. She had spent 2 weeks preparing the pitch. Deck, renderings, a full rebranded portfolio designed to make Ashworth Premier look like exactly the kind of firm Julian Cross's hospitality group would want to anchor a flagship development. Terrence nodded once. "We're ready," he agreed. The elevator opened. They were shown into a conference room on the east side of the building. Wide windows, a long, pale oak table, chairs that cost more than most people's furniture. A junior associate from Julian's team offered water and told them Mr. Cross would be a few minutes. Terrence set his materials at the head of the table without being invited to. Old habit. Douglas sat down heavily and loosened his collar by a 1/4 inch. Brianna arranged the printed deck in front of each chair with practiced efficiency, her movements quick and certain. She had done this before. Marketing was what she was good at. The shape of things, the presentation of things, making something look better than it was. She believed in that skill completely. She believed in it the way people believe in skills they have never had to defend in front of someone who knows the truth. 3 floors up, in a smaller room with a slanted afternoon light coming through the window, Simone was reading. The preliminary findings from the Industry Ethics Board were 6 pages long, printed on the board's official letterhead. She had read them twice already. She was reading them a 3rd time now, not because she needed to. She had them essentially memorized, but because she wanted the words clear and solid in her mind when she walked into that room. The submissions in question listed Terrence Ashworth as sole creative author for projects dated 2016 through 2022. Documentation subsequently provided to this board indicates material creative authorship was held, in whole or substantial part, by Simone Ashworth, née Baptiste. Marketing materials prepared and submitted by Brianna Voss, then serving as marketing coordinator, have been confirmed as containing misrepresentation of authorship. This constitutes a formal violation of the board's Submission Ethics Code, Section 4, Article 2, Formal Violation. Simone set the papers down. Julian was across the table from her, reviewing something on his tablet, unhurried. He had been like that from the beginning. No rushing, no performing. Just attention directed exactly where it needed to be. They're already in the conference room. His assistant had told them 5 minutes ago. Julian looked up. "You sure you want to do it this way?" he asked. Not challenging, just asking, the way he always did, giving her the space to change her mind without pressure. "Yes," Simone said. She had thought about other ways to handle this. A letter, a legal filing, a private meeting with Terrence's attorney where documents were exchanged and consequences were negotiated behind closed doors. Clean, quiet, the way she had handled everything for a decade. She was done handling things quietly. This was her work on those walls downstairs. Her drawings, her spatial reasoning, her hours, stamped with someone else's name and submitted to judges who never knew the difference. Brianna had typed those submissions, had drafted the language, had looked at Simone's work, and written designed by Terrence Ashworth, and pressed send. They would both find out what she knew. Today. In person. Together. No private channels. No filtered second-hand accounts. No room for Terrence to spin a version of this before Simone had spoken. She picked up the ethics board findings and slid them into the folder with the rest of her documents. She stood. Julian stood with her. "Ready?" he said. "Yes," she said again. The conference room doors were heavy and opened inward. Julian's assistant pulled them from the outside, both panels at once. Terrence was mid-sentence at the head of the table, his hand moving in the easy, broad gesture he used when he was performing confidence. Brianna stood to his left, one hand resting on the open deck, her mouth slightly open to add something. Both of them stopped. The sentence stopped. The hand stopped. The room stopped. Simone walked in. She set her folder on the table without hurrying. She looked at Terrence first, then at Brianna. Her face was composed and even and completely still. "I think," she said, "we have a few things to cover." Simone sat down at Julian's right hand. Not at the side of the table. Not in a chair someone had assigned to her. At the head of it, right where Terrence had placed himself without being asked 20 minutes ago. Out of habit. He noticed. She could tell by the way his jaw moved. She opened her folder. "I'm going to keep this simple," she said. "There's a lot to cover." Terrence leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms, the casual gesture of a man trying to look relaxed. "Simone, I don't know what you think you're doing here, but this is a business meeting. Whatever personal—" "It is a business meeting," she said. "That's exactly what it is." She pulled out the first set of documents and placed them flat on the table, then slid copies down toward Douglas and Brianna without breaking stride. "My sister is a forensic accountant. She spent the past year reviewing the financial records from Ashworth Premier Developments. What she found were 4 years of falsified consulting fees, invoices paid to outside contractors who provided no services, The money funded personal expenses. She paused. Specifically, hotel stays and travel for multiple extramarital relationships, starting in 2019. Douglas looked down at the papers in front of him. His face didn't change. That was almost worse, the careful stillness of a man doing fast, private math. Brianna's hand moved slightly on the table. Just a small pull, like she wanted to take the document back. Terrence's voice came out smooth and dismissive, but it was working too hard to sound that way. These are personal matters, and they have nothing to do with— They have everything to do with the firm's accounts, Simone said, because that's where the money came from. The same accounts Douglas guaranteed loans against. She looked at Douglas directly. He didn't use personal funds. He used the business. Douglas looked up from the page. He looked at Terrence. Terrence said nothing. Simone turned the next page in her folder. The awards. She set down copies of the submissions, 6 of them spanning 2016 to 2022. Each one listed Terrence Ashworth as sole creative author. Each one bore the firm's official letterhead. Each one had been submitted to the Industry Design Excellence Board, which had used those submissions to award Ashworth Premier a total of 4 professional commendations over those years. These projects, all 6 of them, were designed by me. The spatial planning, the material selections, the full interior architecture. I have the original drafts, the revision histories, the client correspondence, every stage of the creative process, documented and dated. She said it without heat. Just fact. Plain and clean. My name appears nowhere on these submissions. She slid one more page forward. The Ethics Board received my documentation 3 weeks ago. Their preliminary findings confirmed misrepresentation of authorship. That is a formal violation of Section 4, Article 2 of their Submission Ethics Code. Then she looked at Brianna. Brianna had gone very still. The kind of still that wasn't calm, the kind of still that came from not knowing which direction to move. You prepared these submissions, Simone said. You wrote the language. You knew whose work it was, and you listed someone else's name. That wasn't a mistake. She let that sit for exactly 1 second. The board's findings name you specifically as the individual responsible for preparing and submitting the materials. Brianna opened her mouth. Closed it. She started. The documentation is very clear, Simone said. Not unkind, not cruel, just accurate. She pulled out the final set of papers, Constance's internal documents, the ones that tracked Terrence's legal maneuvering to remove Simone's name from a decade of signed project agreements. The timeline was there. The attorney correspondence was there. The dates, running right up against the edge of the divorce finalization, were there. And this, Simone said, is the attempt to erase me after the fact, to strip my name from the contracts before the divorce closed and increase the firm's valuation for a planned sale. She placed the stack in front of Terrence. Your own mother gave me these. That landed. It landed harder than anything else she had said. She could see it in his face, the way something behind his eyes simply caved. Brianna turned and looked at Terrence with an expression that was no longer professional. It was cold, calculating, the look of someone recalculating how close they were standing to a fire. Douglas Reyes pushed his chair back. The sound of it on the floor was quiet, but everyone heard it. He stood up slowly, gathering the papers Simone had given him and stacking them into a neat pile. He picked them up. He put them under his arm. I'm out, he said. Not to the room, to Terrence specifically. I'm withdrawing my backing today. All of it. I want documentation of the exit by end of week. He didn't wait for a response. He nodded once at Julian, once at Simone, and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft, final click. The room was quiet. Terrence sat with his hands flat on the table, his face the color of old concrete. Brianna stared at the window. Neither of them spoke. Julian set down his tablet and folded his hands. "Ashworth Premier's proposal is declined," he said. His tone was pleasant and completely without warmth. "Simone Ashworth Design is our confirmed sole design partner for this project. That contract was signed 3 weeks ago." He closed the folder in front of him. "I think we're done here." The news moved fast. That was how it worked in a city like this. 1 phone call became 3. 3 became a press mention. A press mention became a quiet conversation between 2 senior partners at a competing firm, over coffee, with raised eyebrows and careful language. By the end of the week following the pitch meeting, everyone who mattered in the design and hospitality world had heard some version of the story. The version that spread was not Terrence's version. He didn't have one yet. Douglas Reyes filed his withdrawal paperwork on Thursday, 2 days after the meeting. He gave no public statement. He didn't need to. The act of withdrawing was its own announcement, loud enough for anyone paying attention to hear. Ashworth Premier's remaining clients heard it clearly. The first call came from a hotel group in Phoenix, a mid-sized project, still in the planning phase. Their project manager sent a 1-paragraph email to Terrence's office manager. The email was polite. It cited changed priorities. It requested the return of their initial deposit by the end of the month. The second call came 2 days later. A residential developer in Atlanta, a man named Hargrove, who had worked with Terrence for 3 years and played golf with him twice a year. Hargrove called personally, which Terrence probably thought was a courtesy. It wasn't. Hargrove asked about the ethics board findings. He asked about the award submissions. He asked specifically whether Terrence had personally signed off on the authorship claims listed in the materials. Terrence said the situation was being handled. Hargrove said he understood, and then he terminated the contract by certified letter the following morning. After that, the calls stopped coming in altogether, which was worse. Brianna's termination was quiet on the surface, but devastating underneath. The industry board's confirmed findings arrived at Ashworth Premier's office on a Tuesday. A formal letter, 4 pages, with her name appearing 11 times across the document. The language was precise and unsparing. The board concluded that Brianna Voss had prepared and submitted award materials she knew contained false authorship attributions, that she had done so across multiple submissions and multiple years, that there was no reasonable interpretation of the evidence suggesting oversight or error. Terrence fired her the same afternoon. He did it by phone. 22 seconds by Brianna's count. She told him that later, the 22 seconds, when she called back screaming. She told him he had asked her to write those submissions. She told him she had the emails. She told him she had kept everything, every instruction, every draft request, every message in which he had directed her to list his name and no one else's, and that if he thought she was going to be the only one buried by this, he had badly miscalculated. He hung up. She sent the emails to 3 people. 2 of them were journalists. The blacklisting came swiftly and without ceremony. The design sector was not large. The hospitality marketing world was smaller still. When the board's findings went on record, Brianna's name was attached to a documented ethics violation in a field where reputation was almost the entirety of the job. 2 firms that had informally approached her about positions in the past year quietly withdrew. A recruiter she had worked with stopped returning her calls. Her name, which she had spent years carefully placing in the right rooms and the right publications and beside the right people, was now a liability. The career she had stepped over Simone to protect was gone. She was 26 years old, and she was starting over from nothing, in an industry that no longer trusted her, standing in the wreckage of a relationship she had bet everything on. The penthouse Terrence had promised was not hers. The title she had used as currency for 2 years had been revoked. The man she had helped destroy a marriage for was on the other end of an unanswered phone call. Constance made her position known at a family dinner in late October. It was a small gathering, her brother-in-law's birthday. Terrence arrived late and sat at the far end of the table, thinner now and quieter in a way that was not peace. Simone had been invited too, an act that was itself a declaration. She came, and she sat near Constance, and the two of them spoke easily about Simone's upcoming project reveal and Constance's garden, which had needed replanting since the summer. At some point near the end of the meal, Terrence said something about the firm finding new footing, about restructuring, about a deal he was exploring. Constance set down her fork. "I won't be part of it," she said. Quietly, not cruelly, but without any softness either. Terrence looked at her. "I have supported this family's business interests for 40 years, she said. "I am not willing to support what this has become." She didn't look at Simone when she said it. She didn't need to. The statement wasn't for Simone's benefit. It was simply the truth, spoken plainly by a woman who had spent too long holding it. Terrence left before dessert. The eviction notice arrived on a Friday. It was printed on white paper, folded into thirds, slipped through the mail slot by a courier who didn't knock. It landed on the office floor next to a stack of unopened vendor invoices and a single framed award. One of the 4 the ethics board had now formally flagged for review. Terrence picked the notice up and sat down in his chair. The office was almost empty. The drafting tables were gone. The model display cases were gone. The receptionist had stopped coming in 2 weeks ago, and he hadn't replaced her because there was no one left to receive. He sat there for a long time, just him and the notice and the silence. The studio had good light. That was the first thing Simone had said when she signed the lease, and it was still true 12 months later. The windows ran floor to ceiling along the east wall, and in the mornings, the sun came in at an angle that turned the white drafting tables gold. She had chosen the paint herself, a warm ivory for the main walls, a single deep green accent behind the reception desk that people always stopped to look at when they came in for the first time. Simone Ashworth Design. The name was etched into the glass door in clean, simple letters. No flourish, no need for one. It was a Thursday in early November, cool and clear, and the city outside was moving the way it always did. Fast, purposeful, indifferent to anyone who couldn't keep up. Simone moved with it easily. She had always been a good walker, steady and unhurried, the kind of pace that looked calm even when her mind was running 3 steps ahead. She had a meeting at 2 o'clock with a tile supplier on the north side of downtown. 40 minutes on foot if she took the long way, which she did. She had learned in the past year to take the long way when she could. There was thinking to be done, and walking was where she did her best of it. The firm had grown faster than she had planned for, which was a good problem to have. Cross Hospitality had signed her as anchor client 8 months ago, a formal contract that carried both the weight of Julian's portfolio and the visibility that came with it. 3 other clients had followed within the quarter: a boutique hotel group out of Nashville, a residential developer in the Arts District, and a small but prestigious museum renovation that had come through a referral she hadn't even solicited. The studio now had 4 full-time designers, a project manager named Dara who had opinions about everything and was right about most of them, and a reception area that was never empty for long. The legal work had taken longer than the business did. Her attorney had filed for retroactive authorship credit across 14 contracts the previous spring, supported by Constance's documents and Yvonne's audit. Terrence had contested 2 of the 14. He had lost both. Her name now appeared where it had always belonged, on the work that had taken 10 years of her life to build. And the record was clean and correct and permanent. She didn't dwell on it. There was nothing to dwell on. The record was simply accurate now, and accurate was enough. Julian had said something like that once, over dinner, a few months ago, that she had a remarkable ability to correct a thing and then put it down. He had meant it as a compliment, and she had taken it as one, though she had also told him it hadn't always been so easy. He had nodded like he believed her. He usually did. Their relationship had not been rushed. It had moved the way good things moved. Slowly at first, with care, and then with a steadiness that felt like something that had always been there, waiting to be found. He didn't try to manage her or outshine her. He showed up, consistently and without theater, and he asked good questions, and when she answered them, he listened. She had forgotten for a while that it could feel like that. She remembered now. She turned south on Carver Street, hands in the pockets of her coat, the sun low and bright ahead of her. The construction site came into view half a block later. It was a mid-sized commercial build, the kind of work that filled out a firm's calendar without defining it. Scaffolding along the front face, a cluster of workers near the entrance, hard hats, coffee cups, clipboards. The project signage was modest. A developer she recognized but had never worked with, a smaller outfit, known for steady but unremarkable work. She saw him before he saw her. Terrence was standing near the site's temporary fence, holding a set of rolled plans, speaking to a man in a yellow vest. He was thinner than she remembered from the family dinner, and something in how he stood had changed. A slight, forward lean that hadn't been there before. A kind of careful attention to the person in front of him that he had never bothered to perform when the room had been his. He looked up. Their eyes met. His expression shifted in the space of a second. Recognition first, then something that moved through shame and regret and landed somewhere past both, in a place she had no name for and no particular interest in exploring. She did not stop walking. She did not smile. She did not harden her expression either. She simply looked at him, briefly and without ceremony, and gave a single, small nod, the kind you offered to someone you once knew, someone who was no longer any part of the life you were building. And then she looked ahead again and kept walking. The sound of the construction site faded behind her. She turned her collar up against the wind and checked the time on her phone. 12 minutes to spare. She walked on. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day.